Hi guys, how are you doing? This is Professor Fernandez, and this particular lesson is going to teach you a little bit about to denote the difference between a news article and an opinion piece. Now, this is important because for your particular class, you're going to be looking at literature and how literature deals with social issues. And of course, when we're talking about literature, we're talking about a whole plethora of things. It's not just short stories and poetry and plays. It is movie scripts and it could be folklore. It can be music. So essentially lyrics from a song, from your favorite song. This is all literature. And what I think literature is pretty much anything that is put together in response to something else. So literature doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I'm going to say that many times this semester, and you're probably not going to understand. So what I am going to say is, think about how you've kind of dealt with things, right? Maybe how you've dealt with maybe COVID, or how you've dealt with the civil unrest that's been happening lately, how you've dealt with maybe a death in the family, or how you've dealt with good things. Maybe you've journaled. Maybe you've written a poem that you secretly don't tell anybody. Maybe you go out and run. Whatever it is that you do is a response to what is happening. Right? Maybe it's like a trigger. Maybe that's a better word to describe that. So for what we're studying, we are studying literature and how it is having a conversation with, or how it's responding to, social issues. So in order for us to do that, we actually have to understand social issues, and we have to look at news articles about what's going on, right? What it's responding to. What is the world that it is kind of pushing back on, essentially. And in order for us to do that, we have to understand what is news versus opinion. Because if you've never actually had a chance to look at that, you will be confused on what an opinion piece is, and you'll think this opinion is news, or this news is kind of opinionated. So we need to understand what that is. So the first thing you need to do is that you need to see if it's labeled. So something like maybe the New York Times or the Washington Post, or any of the modern, I want to say gray ladies. So any of the newspapers who are online, they tend to label their opinion pieces. So you'll see something that'll say opinion, right? Or you'll see something that says health or science or news, right? They tend to label their things, but you can't depend on them being labeled. And you really have to understand the tone of the piece to see if it's news or opinion. Because sometimes you'll be in maybe the databases and you'll read something thinking it's a news piece, but in fact it is an opinion piece, right? And so opinion pieces are null and void, especially if you're doing something like a journal. So first things first, you have to see how it is written. News pieces are always, forever until the end of time, written in third person. So it will not use the words I or we unless it is in a quote, right? So it won't say we believe this, or I believe this, or I think that. That's because there is no opinion in news. So the news gives you the news of the day. There will be no I or we. There will just be third person. So it'll say someone said, the mayor said, this person said. Mostly it'll give you a last name depending on the news article. If it's the New York Times, they'll go Mr. something, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones as something of an attribution. Talking about attributions, news articles will actually quote people. They will actually have quotation marks and said this person said this, or they're paraphrase what a person said. Opinion columns or opinion pieces don't necessarily have quotes. They can have quotes, but they don't always have quotes. So a news article will have quotes in them. And that's a little different than probably what you're used to. You were probably taught that that articles have different sources and they cite their sources, and they do. Scholarly articles cite their sources. They have like a bibliography or a works cited, or they have footnotes that tell you where they got the information. But news articles don't do that because it's a different way of writing, where scholarly articles have to write based on their style, like MLA style or APA style or Chicago style. So they write their sources that way. News articles use something called Associated Press style. So they don't have a works cited page. You're not going to see in-text citations there. How they cite their sources is that they use quotes. They say, Mr. Smith said X. And so they'll quote what Mr. Smith said. Or this article or this document says this. So they'll cite it that way as well. So that's how you know the difference between a news article, an opinion piece, and a scholarly article, which are really great. But for us, since we're looking specifically at social issues and what is going on, especially in terms of context, news articles for us are a little bit better than scholarly articles because we're studying that. You also want to look at what is being covered. News only really comes in one flavor. It's the news. Maybe it's science news or maybe it's technology news, but it is news. There's like a time element. Such and such happened on Thursday. This week, such and such happened. It tells you the who, what, when, where, why, or how of the thing that's happening. Opinion pieces don't do that. Opinion pieces are things like book reviews or fashion reviews or fashion columns, people's editorial columns where they want to talk about maybe politics or what's going on at city government or, especially lately, the federal government. There are letters to the editor where readers and viewers write in their opinions and they're short, right? So that's another way you can tell the difference between a news piece and an opinion piece, because news only comes in one flavor, news. They're telling you what is happening, who did it, how it happened, why it happened, and where it happened, and what happened, right? Where opinion pieces actually comment on that. So that's the difference. You also want to think about tone, and tone is a really interesting, and it's a sticky widget type of thing, because with tone, you want to look at how things are written, not what is thought. For example, a news article will just give you the facts. It will not give you an opinion unless something happened. For example, they will talk about maybe a crazy thing that happened at City Hall, where there was a filibuster, and maybe they're describing what's happening in the filibuster because filibusters happen and they are lengthy. And so that is a description of what's happening while people are filibustering. Maybe they have their balled up fists shoved in their cheek because they're just tired. Maybe people are eating like a Snickers and they have this bored look on their face. That's more of a description rather than a commentary of this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, I don't really care, or oh my gosh, there should never be a filibuster ever again. Those are opinions versus describing what's there. And that's where you have to look at tone. With tone, you really are thinking about word choice. Another word for word choice is called diction, right? This is something that'll come up this semester. So you'll look at word choice, diction. How is this reporter writing it versus this columnist writing it? What choices are they using it? Are what they're using it fair? Or are the words they're using fair? If it is, more than likely, it's a news piece versus it sounds fair, but it kind of sounds slanted. It's more than likely a column piece. Now, again, tone is a sticky widget because there's some people that will look at a news piece and say, well, this definitely has a negative tone to it. Well, is the news negative? Well, if the news is negative, it's automatically going to have a tone of a negative, right? It's not going to be lilacs and daisies on a negative story, right? You're not going to have cotton candy and rainbows and butterflies on a positive story, or on a negative story. But they're telling you straight the facts anyway. So it's a combination of all these things that I just described. First person versus third person, the tone, if they're labeled or not, if they're giving you the news of the day, or if they're commenting on the news of the day. All of these will tell you, in combination with each other, will tell you if it's a news piece versus an opinion piece. Like I said before, you can look at a news piece and you may believe that the tone is negative, but the story is kind of a negative Nelly. So the tone will be negative automatically, but it's citing other people and it's quoting other people. It's not using I, it's using the third person, and it's giving you the news of the day. So if it's doing all that, even though the tone is, you believe the tone is negative, then it's a news story. So these are some of the ways you can tell what's a news story, what's an opinion piece. You will use news stories for this particular class, not quite opinion pieces. You will read opinion pieces because I'll give you opinion pieces to read as part of literature, but you will actually use news stories to talk about how the literature is discussing or having a conversation with, or using the social issue or the event as context for the literature. And so that'll be fun to use, right? So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you need more clarification, and I will talk to you in class. Bye.